Welcome, everyone, to the Word on Fire show. So glad you could join us today. Thank you for all our listeners. I wish you guys could be down here in the studio with us today in Santa Barbara. It's a beautiful day, as always. I'm here with the man in black, Bishop Barron. Bishop, how you doing?
Hey, Joe. Great being with you. I'm doing good.
Great being with you as well, Bishop. Now, what you busy with the confirmations? What's going on with you? You got weddings? It's wedding season?
Well, not so much weddings, but as a bishop, you do tons of confirmations. So I've got about 40, and they're in a 2-month period. So like last weekend, I had 5, one on Friday, 2 Saturday, 2 Sunday. Got one tonight, and then I've got 4 more this coming weekend. So they're great. I like confirmations, but you do a lot at one time. And so you get sort of sick of your own homily. That's part of the problem. Right. But no, they're great joy. And to address kids that age, like 15, 16 years old out here, and such an important time, and to bring something of the gospel to them, I enjoy doing that. But the season will be over in about a month, the confirmation season.
And you'll get some of your life back then.
Yeah.
What's left between all the traveling and everything.
Right. But during this time, basically, I can't travel anywhere. You're pretty much on full-time alert for confirmations,
I don't imagine you've had much time to check out any movies recently.
Well, it's harder this season because the weekend is totally taken up.
Yeah, that's when all the confirmations are.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So my usual, if I see a movie, it's usually on a Friday or Saturday evening if I can. But during this season, it's tough, yeah.
Well, last week we talked a lot about the Coen brothers films, and it was
Love
a big
the Coen
hit.
brothers.
Yeah, it was a big hit, and so I thought this week, there's so many great movies that they've made. We take another episode and do kind of a part 2 of the Coen brothers and their spiritually alert films. So today, let's start with A Serious Man. That movie I hadn't seen until you recommended it.
Yeah, it's so good. I mean, all their movies are watchable, but that one I think has such really clear religious motifs. We mentioned, I think, last time that the Coen brothers have in common with Bob Dylan. They're both Jews from Minnesota. And the Coen brothers use Bob Dylan a lot in their movies, most famously in Big Lebowski. But this movie is set, The Serious Man, in Minnesota, in the Jewish community there. So the same kind of world that Bob Dylan and the Coen brothers came of age in. And it's about this man, Lawrence Gopnik, who's a math professor, right? But it's kind of a modern retelling of the story of Job, because he's a good man, a serious man, religiously serious man, whose life just begins to unravel in every possible way. Marriage collapses. He's up for tenure, but there's someone who's trying to undermine his tenure bid. There's a student who got a failing grade and now is trying to bribe him, and when that doesn't work, he accuses him. So it's like from every angle, he's being just assaulted, and he wonders, what is going on here? What is God up to? And the movie unfolds as his life kind of unraveling, and then he's trying to find wisdom from his own Jewish tradition. And so he visits, he tries to see the chief rabbi, but he's out of town. So he gets the young, like just out of school, the young rabbi, who's a very charming sort of figure, naive, spiritually naive. And he basically tells him, Larry, look at the parking lot. God is everywhere. God's in the parking lot. Look at the parking lot, Larry. So here's a man whose life is unraveling.
What did you think of
that? And this bozo is
advice,
telling him God's in the parking lot. Now, but here's a typical Coen brothers. It's funny, yes, kind of ludicrous. What an immature thing to say. On the other hand, is there something right about it? Yeah, it seems to me. Where's God? Everywhere. God's even in very ordinary things in places like parking lots. Is there a spiritual wisdom that he's taking in from this kind of goofy kid? Yeah, even as we laugh at it. Well, his life continues to unravel, so he goes now to the rabbi he was originally trying to see, this older, like a middle-aged man. And he tells him the story of the goy's teeth. And this
it's a little vignette almost.
Oh, it's wonderful, and it's wonderfully told. About a Jewish dentist, right? And to the dentist comes this non-Jewish man, a Gentile, and the dentist takes a what do you call it, a mold of his teeth, right? And as he's making the bridge, he notices on the inside back of his lower teeth are these clearly written Hebrew letters that say, "Help me, save me."
Right.
And so it's like, what in the world? How could this, first of all, it's on the inside back. How would anyone carve that, even if they wanted to?
Right, and the guy's not Jewish.
Right, he's a goy.
He's a goy.
So he wouldn't even know Hebrew. And there they are. It's not, just an accident.
And he's a middle-aged man. He's like some heavy metal dude that would have weird body altercations.
Yeah, no.
Stuff.
So he just wonders, what is this all about? And he searches out the meaning of it. In Hebrew, every letter corresponds to a number, so he figures out the numbers, and it's actually 7 numbers, so maybe it's a phone number. So he calls the phone number, and it's just this local grocery store, and he finds, the Red Robin, I think it's called. And so he searches and asks. Well, he finally comes to the same rabbi, right, that Larry is seeking advice from. And the rabbi says, I don't know, but, help me, save me. Does it mean be kind to others? Yeah, it couldn't hurt.
Right.
And with that, the guy is liberated. With that, he's like, all right, I get it. And he starts sleeping again, returns to life, and everything's fine. And so Larry goes, that's the meaning of the story? And he was like, yeah. Well, again, we laugh because
a borderline miracle happened.
Right. And that's all you get from it?
Right.
So we laugh the same way we laughed at the kid, but is there something right in that too? That is the ultimate purpose of all religious writing? Something like, help people, be kind to people, So the spiritual wisdom in there. Well, finally, the ancient rabbi. So you have a young rabbi, middle-aged rabbi, and now an ancient rabbi, right? And he's the venerable wisdom figure in the tradition. And to me, the funniest scene is when poor Larry, at his wit's end, life unraveling in every possible way, is seeking an appointment with him. And he goes there, and there's the secretary, No, he can't see you. Please check. Could you please check? And so then very slowly she gets up walks down this long corridor, and he can see what's going on, and she speaks to the rabbi. Then very slowly walks back down the long,
right.
And then says, he can't see you.
Right.
He's busy. And Larry goes, he doesn't look busy.
He's thinking.
Yeah, he's thinking. Right. So, but anyway, what's cool about that rabbi, Larry doesn't see him, but Larry's son does, because Larry's son's getting bar mitzvah, right? And the bar mitzvah boys all see this ancient rabbi, Well, they had confiscated the bar mitzvah boys' little transistor radio. And on the transistor, he had the Jefferson Airplane, that you got to find somebody to love. You better find somebody to love, that song. And so the old rabbi had no idea what the Jefferson Airplane, but he did his research, and he found out who the members of the group are.
Right.
And so when the kid comes in, he starts naming them, and the kid looks up, and then he recites that line. You got to find somebody to love,
And you could tell it was impacting. I mean, we're just talking about confirmations, right? And reaching those kids. You could tell that kid was affected.
Absolutely. And then the climax of the movie. And again, we do our spoiler alerts for everybody.
Right.
So,
by the way.
Spoiler alert. At the very end of the movie, so the bar mitzvah's over and everything, and the kids are back in this sort of school area, and a great storm is coming. And, of course, as I'm a Midwesterner, so I know about those big Midwestern storms that come rolling across the plains. And here it comes, like this great tornado. And then we hear on the soundtrack the Jefferson Airplane singing, you better find somebody to love. You got to find somebody to love, right? And what you're reminded of now is, this movie's all about Job. It's about an honest man, a righteous man, a serious man whose life is unraveling. He's seeking wisdom. Remember, Job has the 3 friends
that
advise him?
Just
the 3
advice.
rabbis.
Yeah.
Now, again, it's not a perfect parallel, because I think the 3 rabbis all have something to say to him. But he's seeking wisdom. And finally, a voice, it's the Jefferson Airplane, comes out of the whirlwind, and that's in the book of Job. It's out of the whirlwind comes God's great speech, the longest speech of God in the whole Bible. And the movie ends with this great speech of God. You got to find somebody to love.
Because they play the song real loud.
It's the voice out of the whirlwind.
Yeah.
And so you look back and say, okay, the young rabbi, hey, Larry, look at the parking lot. Is there something right in that? Yeah, God's in all things. The middle-aged rabbi, well, maybe the purpose of all this Hebrew writing and miracles and stuff is to help us, find a path of helping other people. And then finally, find somebody to love. Those aren't bad religious messages. As a man's life is unraveling and he's trying to understand what is God up to, well, there it is. He does get a certain wisdom, and it's the wisdom of the book of Job, which isn't like, oh, slam dunk answer. I got it. Solved every problem. But it is something of religious significance. And the serious man does find a serious answer by the end of that movie.
Word on Fire, we've been working on the David the King series and our new DVD that's going to be coming out soon. And in that film, I couldn't help but notice the parallel to David, where he's standing on the rooftop and he notices the neighbors. There's another biblical reference, and there's kind of an aside, the temptation.
Right. He's up checking the antenna of the house because his son wants to watch F Troop. And I remember F Troop when I was a kid. So it's coming in fall. And I remember those days too. When my father
to your dad.
My father would hit the TV on the side. I remember distinctly. And we'd play with the antenna. So Larry's up on the roof, like David in the Bathsheba story, and indeed he sees this beautiful woman who is sunbathing, in her yard. So it's just an evocation of David, and it's indeed a sort of temptation to Larry as his own wife is leaving him. I figure, why don't I just leave her too? But see, he's a serious man. He's a serious, moral man who really is not just an intellectual. He's trying to live an upright life. And I just thought that was kind of a beautiful scene.
Yeah, it was a great movie. I mean, you have to be patient with it. It was one of those ones that was a thought-provoking film. It wasn't a lot of clash bang. And the Coen brothers are good like that. They make you think. They make you work for it. And
every scene in it is watchable. Every scene, there's something like, what's going on? Who's this guy? Like his brother, the poor uncle,
that constant
who has a cyst on his neck and he's draining it. And it's annoying the kids because he's in the bathroom again.
Yeah, so gross.
But they're good at showing this kind of really nerdy, quirky, unhappy side of life that we all have to deal with, You're searching for the will of God, and you got to drain the cyst on the back of your neck. You know what I'm saying? You're looking for God's purpose for you, and you got to deal with your annoying neighbors. And so that's life.
You're tuned in to the Word on Fire show here with Bishop Barron, and we are on part 2 talking about the Coen brothers films and all the spiritual references within them. I think the Coen brothers are particularly good at showing those characters that are just salt of the earth, real unique, quirky, amazing characters. Speaking of one of the quirkiest characters I think that's ever been created by the Coen brothers, in a movie that I was surprised that you said that you could find a lot in this movie. It's Big Lebowski.
Oh, yeah. Now, let me just say before we go any further, for fans of mine who might be, I'm not recommending that curl up with your little kids and watch The Big Lebowski together.
Please do not.
No, these movies are they're for adults, and I'm not morally approving of all that's being said and done. But that's the way artists work. Is look, if you were to film the Bible, just take the Bible just as it's written and film it, it would have at least an R rating, right? I mean, the Bible shows you all forms of human dysfunction, all kinds of quirky, dysfunctional behavior. So it's not like we're morally approving of everything that's being said and done in these movies. So just to be clear about that. And I certainly don't recommend, Bishop Barron said The Big Lebowski is a great religious movie. No, it's not Man for All Seasons. It's not Ben-Hur. I love those movies, by the way. And you can curl up with your family and watch Ben-Hur and Man for All Seasons. So just to be clear about that, we're not saying that.
Don't send a letter.
Don't send a letter and say, how could you watch? And no, I'm not approving of everything in these movies. The Big Lebowski, though, which, as you know, is kind of a cult movie now. It came out right after Fargo. So the Coen brothers have a big hit with Fargo. Everyone admires it. A lot of people, frankly, when The Big Lebowski came out, thought that's their follow-up.
Because it's so goofy and bizarre.
And I'll confess that, too. I've watched it many, many times now, but the first, couple times I watched it, I was like, what? It's this really impenetrable plot, and these really goofball characters who, are crude, and I don't get it.
It's esoteric humor about Los Angeles too. Now
that I'm here, I get a lot more of it. I do, and all the references, to Malibu, the In-N-Out Burger, the 405.
Oh, it's like all every
stuff.
landmark. Yeah,
right. But it's again one of those movies that repays careful watching. Now, what can we say about it? And don't think, it's a perfect allegory for Christianity. Like we just line it up and everything. No, it's not like that. They like to play, I think, with icons and images and symbols, So who's the Big Lebowski? Well, the first time we see him, he's in this grocery store and he's wearing a robe. He has shoulder-length long hair and a beard, right? and he looks, just adapt the robe a little bit, and he's the biblical Christ from a lot of Cecil B. DeMille movies, So he looks like a Christ figure. And that imagery now continues throughout the movie. There's a famous kind of dance scene. They have these sort of fantasy sequences. And the Big Lebowski appears now in a carpenter's outfit, right? He's wearing a carpenter's belt and kind of a jumpsuit type thing. Well, he's the carpenter, as Jesus was a carpenter. There's one scene in the movie where they're in the bowling alley. He loves to bowl, right, with his friends. And he puts his arms out wide and throws his head back. And he assumes the stance of the crucified Jesus. His pacifism. So at one point, when there's a great violence breaking out, he said, "Hey, look, I'm a pacifist, man."
Yeah.
So there are a number of references throughout the movie to the Big Lebowski as a Jesus figure, and then he's playing off Walter, who's the character played by the great John Goodman, who's in a lot of the Coen brothers films, and is a very fine actor. John Goodman is a guy named Walter Sobchak, who is actually Polish Catholic by extraction, but through a previous marriage, he had become Jewish, right?
Right.
And
hilarity ensues.
Right. But what's interesting about it is he embodies so much of the thundering legalism of the God of the Old Testament. So they're bowling, right? And one of their opponents gets up, a very kind of a sweet, gentle guy, and he throws he rolls his first ball and he gets an 8, right? He says, "Hey, put me down for an 8." And Walter, no, you went over the line.
Right.
You crossed the line. "Hey, no, I didn't, man. I crossed the line." "You crossed the line." And then before you know it, Walter has a gun in his hand, and he's pointing it at the man.
Right.
So he's threatening him with death over this minor infraction of the law, Now, keep in mind, the Coen brothers are Jews, and they're coming up out of their own Jewish tradition. Walter is a very careful observer of the Sabbath, right? Shabbos, he keeps calling it. And there'll be a date for their bowling, team on a Saturday. "I don't roll on Shabbos." "Oh, Walter, come on. I don't roll on Shabbos." Right. So the strict legalism. Is there a play in the movie? Again, I say play because it's really a comedy, this movie. Don't press it all the way allegorically. But is there a play between the God of the Old Testament there, the kind of stereotypical Old Testament view of God, and then Lebowski, the dude, is kind of a New Testament, Christ figure? And do we watch in the course of the movie the two kind of playing off each other? Maybe the most remarkable thing from a Christ figure standpoint is this comic scene at the very end. Their friend Donnie has died of a heart attack, and Donnie is this kind of gentle soul, and Donnie's cremated. Well, they're too cheap to buy even the cheapest receptacle, so they put his ashes in a coffee can, and they go out to the Pacific shore, and Walter gives this sort of asinine speech, and then he starts to scatter the ashes of Donnie, but the wind kicks up, and the ashes are all blown back on the dude. And the dude is covered in the ashes of Donnie. Well, it's a funny scene, ludicrous, absurd. But you also think, okay, Christ, who takes upon himself sin and death, who endures, takes upon himself the suffering and dysfunction of the world. Then, of course, the giveaway at the very end of the movie, the great Sam Elliott, you all know him, the character actor, often plays cowboys, and he's at the bar there in the bowling alley in his cowboy uniform, and he's the narrator. Certainly, is he something of a God figure himself? Well, he seems to know everything about everybody. He seems to know every private detail of the plot and everything. Right. But he greets the dude, and then the dude leaves, and he said, "See you later, dude." And the dude goes, "The dude abides." And then off he goes, and then the cowboy goes, "The dude abides. I don't know about you, but I take comfort in that." Right. He's taking it easy for all of us sinners. And so, it's a pretty clear Christ reference there of, "I'll be with you till the end of the age. The dude abides." And we take comfort in that he's taken it easy for all of us sinners. He's just been covered in the ashes of sin and death. And now he's enduring something for all of us sinners. So, I mean, certainly a lot of Christian imagery is being evoked. Again, don't press it too far because the dude is hardly, in every detail an edifying Christ figure. But I think it's sort of like a comic take on the Christ image, I would say.
Yeah, and I think that if you can pull spiritual imagery from the Big Lebowski, you really become good at evangelizing the culture and finding seeds of the word.
Yeah, and even something as quirky as at the very end when they're confronted by the nihilists, and that's in itself kind of interesting how the nihilists are confronting the Old Testament and the New Testament. They confront Walter and the dude.
Tons of philosophical allusions in the film.
Well, and in fact, this is as dude and Walter are walking out of the bowling alley. What are they talking about? They're talking about the Rambam. Now, who's the Rambam? Rambam was a medieval Jewish mystic. It's a longer name, and they hyphenate it as the Rambam. Like Moses Maimonides has some other name, and then there's the Rambam. So they're talking about an arcane point of like Talmudic Jewish commentary. Across the street from them in that scene, there's the Ben-Hur auto repair shop. And as the nihilists attack Walter and the dude, Walter bites the ear off of one of the nihilists,
right.
Remember?
That stuck out to me.
Well, what is that, of course? But now he's not so much the Old Testament, he's Peter, as they come to get Jesus, and he cuts off the ear of the high priest slave, right?
Right.
So now Walter is kind of a sidekick character the way Peter is to Jesus. Right. And so there he's, if you want, the kind of more, in-your-face spirituality of the Old Testament, and the dude, again, is trying to, make peace and so on. Also, at the heart of the plot, and I won't even begin to rehearse the plot because it's famously impenetrable, but what's dude doing? But he's paying a ransom, right? That's his job. The Big Lebowski, the father figure, gives to the dude, like the little Lebowski, the task of paying a ransom. Well, that's Jesus. The father gives the son the task of paying the ransom, and the ransom involves being covered in sin and death, which is how it happens at the end. What does he do thereby? But he faces down the forces of nihilism. So if you want to go all the way with that, so I think that's kind of what they're playing with.
Sure.
And I'd emphasize playing with.
Right.
In the Big Lebowski.
Yeah, it's hard to deny that those spiritual allusions are there, that those biblical references are there.
Right.
And that's what we're talking about.
Even his girlfriend's name is Maud. Well, what's Maud but a derivative of Maudlin, which is in turn a derivative of Magdalene. So Maud is a Mary Magdalene type figure. Anyway.
That's a fact. Biblical allusions in Big Lebowski. Don't write a letter about it.
Yeah.
Moving on to Hail Caesar.
Don't curl up with your kids to watch it. At my recommendation,
That as well. Moving on to Hail Caesar.
Oh, I loved Hail Caesar.
More tasteful. Good film. And also a lot of biblical allusions.
How's it begin? Hail Caesar. I remember in the theater. Who I was with now. I think I saw it out here in California. Is that right? I forget when it came out. But anyway, the opening scene is the crucified Jesus. It begins with a depiction of the crucified Jesus, and then we see a man in the confessional box. What's his name? But what's his first name? His last name is Mannix.
Mickey or something like that.
Not Mickey, no. I can't remember his first name now. But anyway, Mannix. He's a mensch. He's a man. Remember, a serious man. And now we have Eddie Mannix. That's it.
Oh, yeah.
Now we have Mannix, another man. What's he doing? But he's confessing his sins. We discover now his job, which is a really quirky job, is he's the sort of manager of a lot of the Hollywood stars. So he works for one of the big studios. And his job is to he's like a fix-it man.
Wrangler.
Make sure things go right. So he's dealing with all these crazy, exotic and dysfunctional characters. All during the movie, he's tempted severely to get a much more mainstream kind of job, right? And he really is tempted. It's better money, better hours.
More time with his family.
Yeah. But somehow he feels, and this becomes clear at the very end, that this is what he's been put on the earth to do. This is what God wants him to do. And no matter how much money or comfort you're offered, that's what you got to do. So I think that's the theme that runs right through the whole movie is what does a man, Mannix, a serious man do? Well, in the presence of God, he discerns what his call is, Now, there's a lot more to say about that movie. It's wonderful, and like all their movies, very quirky. But I think a lot of them are about serious spiritual people who are wrestling with their vocation and with the kind of weirdness of life, And in this case, he hangs in there and finds his proper vocation.
Now it's time for our listener question. Remember, if you have a question for Bishop Barron, go to askbishopbarron.com and record your question from any device, and perhaps you'll be featured on one of our upcoming episodes. Today's question comes from Michael, and Michael wants to know how he can best love God. Let's listen to Michael.
Hello, Bishop Barron. My name is Michael from Lafayette, Indiana. My question is this. I have always been fascinated by Mark chapter 12, verse 30, in which Jesus commands us to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. But what exactly is God? I ask this so I know how to love him better. Thank you very much.
Well, it's a great question with all kinds of philosophical implications. And remember, the young Thomas Aquinas asked the same question. But, Master, what is God? Because it's not the least bit self-evident, Quick answer, and it addresses a implied question within your question. God is not one being among many. God is not the supreme being so much. The supreme being would be like an archangel, maybe, or seraph or something. It would be the highest being. What is God but, as Thomas says, ipsum esse, which means to be itself, the sheer act of existence itself, in and through which all finite things come to be and endure in being. Now, this helps to answer the implied question. If you love God with everything you've got, well, then what do you have left for anybody else, right? You say you love God with your whole heart, whole mind. Well, then don't we all just have to become all the Lee's monks or something, that all we ever do? Well, no, if God were a supreme being, that might be true. I got to eschew everything else to just get to God. The right answer is that loving God with my whole heart, soul, and mind means I love all things that participate in God. I love all that God loves. It's like when a person falls in love, there's a tendency now to love those that your beloved loves, right? And so if you love God with your whole heart, it means, of course, you love all the things that participate in the to be of God. So therefore, it's not an either-or game. Precisely because you love God with your whole heart, you can love everything in the world, in the appropriate way. As Augustine put it, making the same point, love God and love everything else for the sake of God. Now you've got it straight. See? If you start loving creatures, now you're off kilter. Love God, and then you'll love creatures in the right way.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Word on Fire show. Be sure to check out our website, wordonfireshow.com. And please go to iTunes. If you've been enjoying the show and you're listening to it every week, go to iTunes and leave us a review. The more reviews we get, the more listeners we get, and the more we can share these ideas with people who may otherwise not be able to hear them. Thanks in advance, and we'll see you back here next week for the Word on Fire show.